have a YouTube channel that I'm working on, and we'll be able to post these audio recordings to the YouTube channel for others to enjoy. Okay, so couple of things here. One is that I am part of the Keystone Group, and that is, just to let you know, is a group that was started out of Vancouver, British Columbia. I happen to be down in Maryland in the USA, so enjoying that. And what I wanted to say first is that we work from the Big Book and only from the Big Book, and we work from the first portion of this Big Book. And the only program of recovery that we talk about is out of the Big Book. So it's just a very straightforward. We don't deviate from this, and we do not interpret in our own words as to what we think that the Big Book is saying. We actually are very direct about what it does say. So with that, we're going to turn, if you'll just open up your Big Book to the very, very, very first page. It says Alcoholics Anonymous. Got a couple of notes for people. It is our basic text, and that in and of itself is the foundation that we work from. It is our program of recovery, and it's not just the first 164 pages. So the book itself is like a textbook. So we actually treat the first portion a lot like that. So when I say the basic text, I'm also talking about it as using it as more of a learning tool than just something to read. All right. So we go ahead and turn to the next page where it says Alcoholics Anonymous. And Rob, if you'll read that first portion there for me.
Would love to. Hi, everybody. My name's Rob Kay. The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism.
Okay, we are working from the 4th edition, just so everybody knows. And also just wanted to say that the most important part of what Rob just read is the story. So this is actually presented as a story, even though we use it as a textbook. The second part of this is that it's the first place where we actually see that people have recovered. All right. So we believe that people can recover from alcoholism. We always are alcoholics, and we never will not be an alcoholic. And but having been through this program, having had a spiritual awakening, we believe that this is a solution for us, and that we do have the opportunity to recover from alcoholism. And when we talk about the thousands of men and women, we're talking about a collective understanding. So it's of several times in the book, it's referring to the first 100. And now that we are in the thousands and thousands of us, it is a collective understanding. I wanted kind of a disclaimer here. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a treatment for alcoholism. It has a solution for alcoholism, and there's a big difference there. So we're not pretending to be medical professionals or anything like that. So, and if you are seeking professional help, we encourage you to continue to do that. In no time or no way would we ever suggest that you stop doing anything that a medical professional is prescribing for you in working with this. Okay, turn to the next page. If you look at the contents here, that's where I'm at, all the way down to first 11 chapters, including the preface and the forewords to the first, second, third, and fourth edition, are all portions of the beginning. It's the first portion of the book that's all inclusive. And then the appendices, especially on page 567, which is the spiritual experience. The first portion of this, and I'm going to break it down for you here if you want to take a few notes, from the preface to the to the forward of the fourth edition is kind of general info and history of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a basic history. It doesn't get into a lot of detail. There are books out there if you're interested in books that are for the history of AA, but this is at least this part gives you the outline of the program and how it got here. The doctor's opinion, Bill's story, there is a solution, and more about alcoholism. I kind of identified those. So those four sections or parts are step one. We agnostics is step two. How it works is step 3 and 4. Into action is steps 5 through 11. And working with others is step 12. And then 2 wives, the family afterward, 2 employers, and a vision for you is really kind of steps 8 through 12. Okay. We turn to the next page. When we talk about the rest of the book, this is just as a to kind of help you out. It's not something that we're going to be looking at, but I did want to give you kind of the parts. So part 1 of the second portion of the book is really what we have referred to as the low bottom drunks. Actually, then part 2 is the high bottom drunks, which is next part. And then part 3, we go back to the low bottom drunks. If you kind of want to read into those areas and stuff. Again, we're not going to cover that in this big book study, but that's just kind of giving you some history there. I've got several names, but I don't have all the names of each of the people that are represented in these stories. But at some point in time, if you wanted to offline, we can do that. Talk about that. And this is more than a book. It's designed to transfer information. So I want to make sure that you kind of understand that we're in the process of transferring information. So right now we are on page XI for everyone. And we're at the preface. I want to just say that we are line by line, and we will go through a paragraph or 2, and then we'll talk about it as we go along. Okay, Rob.
This is the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. The first edition appeared in April 1939, and in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. The second edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The third edition, which came off press in 1976, achieved a circulation of approximately 19,550,000 in all formats. Because this book...
Go ahead. That's okay, Rob. Sorry.
Because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th editions. This section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor.
Sure. So we'll stop right there for a second. So a couple of things I want to highlight, and I've underlined. One is that this book has become the basic text. So I've underlined basic text for our society, and has helped such large numbers of alcoholics, of men and women, to recovery. We have strong sentiment against radical changes being made in it. That has largely been the same since the first printing of the book. The stories in the back has been mainly what has changed most, although they have changed some of the chapters back and forth around, and we might be able to talk about that going forward. AA is a recovery program. and it has been largely untouched. And the reason why it's been untouched is because it works, absolutely works. If you give yourself over to this program of recovery, if you have your spiritual awakening and you follow the steps that are outlined in the first portion of this book, and you fully commit to it, I have not yet seen anybody not recover from alcoholism. And we are talking about the fourth edition. We'll talk a little bit more about William D. Silkworth, Dr. Silkworth here in the future here when we get to the doctor's opinion. Rob?
Okay. As Leo had pointed out, this is more than a book to transmit information. This book is designed to enable me to have a spiritual experience significant enough to bring about recovery. I need more than knowledge about recovery, to stay sober. This is a textbook to transmit knowledge. Okay, we need somebody usually to take us through it. The second printing of this edition added the appendix, spiritual experience, in the second edition. The appendices on AA tradition, the medical view, and religious view of AA, the Lasker Award, and information on how to contact AA were added, and the appendix on the Alcohol Foundation was discontinued. But the chief change was in the section of personal stories, which was expanded to reflect the fellowship's growth. Bill's story, Dr. Bob's nightmare, and one other personal history from the first edition were retained intact. 3 were edited, and one of these was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written with new titles. 30 completely new stories were added, and the story section was divided into 3 parts under the same headings that are used now. In the third edition, Part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 of the stories in Part 2, They Stopped in Time, were carried over from the second edition. 8 new stories were added. In Part 3, They Lost Nearly All. 8 stories were retained. 5 new ones were added. This force.
Just real quick, as I outlined earlier, Part 1 is what we have come to know as the low bottom drunks. If you remember, if you know anything about AA back in the beginning, they were really going after the people that were really in a bad place. And they were finding them in hospitals and sanitariums that we have come to know now as recovery places that people go to detox and such. So Part 2 is the high bottom drunks, if you will. Again, it's kind of a gray area when we talk low and high. Everybody has their own low and everybody has their own high. So the point is that I think that since 1939, things have kind of changed. We're getting people that are a lot younger. We're getting people that are at the beginning of their disease of alcoholism instead of at the end, which is great. It's we're finding people a lot earlier. So I think that we can identify more with the high bottom drunks as opposed to the low bottom drunks. We still have those. They're always going to be here, unfortunately. And then Part 3, again, they lost nearly all, is 13 stories that show people that pretty much lost everything. So at a low bottom for them as well. All right, Rob.
This fourth edition includes the 12 concepts for world service and revises the 3 sections of personal stories as follows. 1 new story has been added to Part 1, and 2 that originally appeared in Part 3 have been repositioned there. 6 stories have been deleted. 6 of the stories in Part 2 have been carried over. 11 new ones have been added, and 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 new stories. 8 were removed in addition to the 2 that were transferred to Part 1. All changes made over the years in the Big Book, AA members' fond nickname for this volume, have had the same purpose: to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately, and thereby to reach more alcoholics. If you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too.
Absolutely. That last paragraph there is so important. we do call this the big book, and representing the current membership as best we can in the stories, obviously. And at the same time, we hope that reading even the first portion of this book, that you have some of the same answers of yes to the last three questions that are posed at the bottom of that paragraph. Okay, so we're going to move on to page XIII, and we're at the foreword to the first edition. One of the things I want to highlight here is that this book is kind of broken down into three areas, and this I just want to give this to you because it's not necessarily put into it directly, but this is where we are. You're going to see that there's a problem, which is your admission and the identification that you do in fact have a problem. They outline a solution, which is to provide you with a solution and prescribe a course of action that you can take in order to recover. And then lastly is that course of action, which is the application of the program of recovery that's outlined in this book. So the problem, the solution, and the course of action. Rob?
Page XIII, forward to the first edition. This is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all.
Absolutely. And Rob, who's understanding?
The first 100 men and women.
Yeah, and they have recovered. Again, I want to highlight this, the first 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. We're going to talk a lot more about that coming up. So I'll just give you a precursor to that there are two symptoms to alcoholism, and we believe in those two symptoms, the malady and the allergy. And then to show other alcoholics precisely. So what do we mean by precisely, Rob?
Exactly. They're going to show exactly how they recovered.
Yeah. And what is
the main purpose?
It is the main purpose of the of how they recovered, and that is the main purpose of this book. All right, Rob?
Okay, remember that they were hopeless because they had no solution, which is why it seemed hopeless for them. With no solution, no recovery. Also, no further authentication will be necessary. We don't need to go anywhere else to look for the answer. The answer will be in this book. Remember, any question that this book asks, they will answer it for you. You don't have to answer it. So it is important that we remain anonymous because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Being mostly business or professional folk, we could not very well on our occupations in such an event. We would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation. When writing or speaking publicly about alcoholism, we urge each of our fellowship to omit his personal name, designating himself instead as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
I'm going to talk about that real quick and what's so important about this, and that is that there are a lot of people out there that don't understand our disease of alcoholism. There is, and we will talk about this in great detail going forward, but there's a lot of folks out there that feel like that this is a bad thing. It's they don't treat it the same as if somebody had a different disease, and the people that have empathy for those folks. For us as alcoholics, people are in belief of, well, you could just quit if you wanted to, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But this anonymity is so important. I will tell you that early in my attempts to get sober, I did join a particular group of alcoholics, and it was a group of folks that had uh, careers that if it was known that they were alcoholics, it would damage their ability to keep and hold their jobs. And here these folks are voluntarily recovering from alcoholism, but the jobs that they had around them were very sensitive to this kind of stuff. So it is very, very important to remain anonymous, and we will do so within this group as well. So just to let you know that. Rob?
Very earnestly, we ask the press also to observe this request, for otherwise we shall be greatly handicapped. We are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. There are no fees or dues whatsoever. The only requirement for membership is the honest desire to stop drinking. We're not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. We shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book, particularly from those who have commenced work with other alcoholics. We should like to be helpful in such cases. Inquiry by scientific, medical, and religious societies will be welcome. Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay, so that last portion there are no fees or dues whatsoever. That is in fact true. We won't ask you for any money, nor do we, if anybody does contribute to Alcoholics Anonymous, it goes straight to the general organization of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I also want to highlight at the end here, it's that this is a we program, not a me program. So that's one of the notes I have at the end of this foreword, is that this is a we program. Rob?
Yeah, we is used 18 times in that part. So as Leo said, it is a we program. Bill always made sure that when he was writing that we was always included. It was never I, it was we. So we're going to the forward to the second edition now, which is on page XV. Figures given in this forward describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. Since the original forward to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at its destination. Already, continues the early text, 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities. 60 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and all of the provinces of Canada. AA has flourished in communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries and U.S. possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encouraged us by saying that this is but a beginning, only an augury of a much larger future ahead.
And real quick, the one thing I want to point out here is that it only takes two to have a fellowship, and in these 2s and 3s and 5s back in that time frame, that's a largely what was happening. We're just very, very small groups of people getting together and putting together what we now know as the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think they want to make a distinction here between the two. One is the fellowship is the getting together of people, much like what we are doing today. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous is what's outlined in this book. So being in this group is being a part of a fellowship, but the program itself is a part of what you're doing that's inside this book. And there's a distinction there. A lot of times you'll hear people say that I'm in the program. But you're not really in the program. You're working the program that so many that came before us is doing. But the real thing is you're in as part of the fellowship like we are today. Rob?
Yeah, just to reiterate, this is the program. This, what we're doing in all these squares, is fellowship. So just like to throw that out there, because for many years I was told every time I went to a meeting, welcome to the program. And that's incorrect. You know, the program is in this book. And we want to make sure that everybody has access to this book. The spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck in Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. He had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism who is now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confessions of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God.
Absolutely. And in the beginning here, I'll go back to the first, back to page XV. The first group was struck at Akron, Ohio, and during a talk between a New York stockbroker, as we have come to know as Bill, and the Akron physician, which we have come to know as Dr. Bob. So those are our two founders going into this. I do want to bring up, and it's going to come up from time to time, but there is a gentleman by the name of Hank Parkhurst that unfortunately was also instrumental in starting Alcoholics Anonymous. And in fact, he was very, very instrumental in getting the big book written. Unfortunately, he went back out and was not and could not recover. And because of that, his name has been stricken from most of the, well, anywhere in this book, of course, but also from the history. But I want to make sure that you know that Hank Parkhurst had an incredibly instrumental piece in the beginning of AA and keeping it going and with this book. The last part of that is that though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford group, this is Bill, he was convinced of the need for a moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harms, and helpfulness to others as the necessity of belief in dependence upon God. So that's really kind of an outline of what this program is about. It's a very, very high level outline. Obviously, we've got a whole lot of detail up underneath all of that, but that is what he's outlining here. And we have all come to know that as the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Rob?
Prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. But he had succeeded only in keeping him sober himself. The broker had gone to Akron on a business venture, which had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician.
Okay, we know that as being Dr. Bob. So again, this is Bill and Dr. Bob. Rob?
Okay, before we go on, I just want everybody to realize that if this broker, which is Bill Wilson, if that deal had worked out, we would not be here today. We would still be suffering because it was only because that deal fell through that Bill realized that he suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he had to carry his message to other alcoholics. If that deal had worked out, he would have been set up for life financially. It was a job that would pay him an awful lot of money, and his whole vision would have switched from helping us to worrying about himself. So I just want to throw that in. This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. He sobered never to drink again up to the moment of his death in 1950. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another, as no non-alcoholic could. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery.
That's a very important sentence. I'd ask you to highlight that at the very end there. It indicated that strenuous work, not just a little bit, but strenuous work one alcoholic with another was vital to permanent recovery. We're going to find that again and again throughout this the program in this book. I'm going to go back up a little bit for earlier. This is, again, this is when the deal had fallen through. Bill reached out. He went to another alcoholic friend of his who told him about Dr. Bob. And as I understand it, he actually found Dr. Bob in near ruins that evening. And that's when he was able to sit down with him, talk to him, and Dr. Bob was able to find the program of recovery. Rob?
A lot of people say that this is a selfish program. All through this book, you're going to hear that it is vital for permanent recovery that you work with another alcoholic. So where is the selfishness in that? We are constantly, once we have gone through all the steps, we go out and we help others. So selfishness, I find very difficult to take in. Hence, the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became AA number 3. He never had another drink. This work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. When the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time.
Okay, Rob?
A second small group promptly took shape at New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was significant to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic.
And real quick, I think it goes without saying, but I thought I would go ahead and bring it up. Back then we didn't have a lot of the communication tools that we have today. A lot of homes didn't even have TVs back then and only had radios. So there was a lot of reading that people did. And so really to get this message out, it had to be almost word of mouth, face-to-face type of gatherings and get-togethers. And again, those 2s and 3s and 5s. But you can imagine how it was back then when somebody could get this book and on their own, actually getting the book and going through the program of recovery. The support structure that we have in place today is immeasurable compared to what they had back then. But it only just strengthens the position that we have, that the tenets of this book, applying the principles, and having that spiritual awakening and committing yourself to strenuous work with other people, you're going to find that you're going to be able to recover. Rob? Okay.
When they talk about hence the two men set work frantically, their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became AA number 3. When you see the picture of Bill and Dr. Bob and a man sitting on a bed, that was the AA number 3, and his name was Bill Dodson. His story is in the back of the book. It was now time the struggling groups fought to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. The flying blind period ended and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. With the appearance of the new book, a great deal began to happen. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, the noted clergyman, reviewed it with approval. In the fall of 1939, Fulton Osler, then editor of Liberty, printed a piece in his magazine called Alcoholics and God. This brought a rush of 800 frantic inquiries into the little New York office, which meanwhile had been established. Each inquiry was painstakingly answered. Pamphlets and books were sent out. Businessmen traveling out of existing groups were referred to these prospective newcomers. New groups started up, and it was found, to the astonishment of everyone, that AA's message could be transmitted in the mail as well as by word of mouth. By the end of 1939, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery.
So important here just to kind of get the gist of what is going on. Again, there's published stories, getting the word out to people, and then the overwhelming response. And to them at the time, 800 people responding and wanting books and information. You can only imagine what they probably were feeling at that moment and how things were starting to take off. Rob?
In the spring of 1940, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave a dinner for many of his friends, to which he invited AA members to tell their story. News of this got on the world wires. Inquiries poured in again, and many people went onto the bookstore to get the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. By March 1941, the membership had shot up to 2,000 members. Then Jack Alexander wrote a feature article in the Sunday Evening Post and placed such a compelling picture of AA before the general public that alcoholics in need of help really deluged us. By the close of 1941, AA numbered 8,000 members. The mushrooming process was in full swing. AA had become a national institution.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it any better than what they did in this paragraph at all. So we'll just keep going, but you can actually see the exponential growth that we have. The foundation that now Alcoholics Anonymous is actually a program, and it's you'll quickly see that we're going from a national institution to a worldwide one.
Our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescence period. The test that it faced was this: could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? Would there be quarrels over membership, leadership, and money? Would there be strivings for power and prestige? Would there be schisms that would split AA apart? Soon AA was beset by these very problems on every side and in every group. But out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene.
One of the things I'll bring up here as far as that goes, that there was a lot of rules that they were trying to apply back then. And not only that, but each of the individual groups felt like that they had to have their own qualifications. Back in 1935 and 39 and in the early days, there was a lot of qualifying of alcoholics. There was a few questions that were being asked, and we'll find out what those are as we go along. But the point being is that Bill and Bob wanted to work with people that truly were alcoholics, that were in really bad shape and that really wanted to recover. So therein lies some of the qualifications that were being built up. And as I understand it, at one point, there were about 100 different things that people had to do in order to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that in and of itself was just ripping the program apart, because how could anybody attain that level of qualification in order to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous? So I just bring that up to say that, a willingness to recover is all that is required nowadays. We got it all the way down to one requirement: a willingness to recover. Is all that's required to be a part of this program. Rob?
As we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic could live, so we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. It was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society, that our leaders might serve but never govern, that each group was to be autonomous, and there was to be no professional class or therapy. There were to be no fees or dues. Our expenses were to be met by our own voluntary contributions. There was to be the least possible organization, even in our service centers. Our public relations were to be based upon attraction rather than promotion. It was decided that all members ought to be autonomous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. And in no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies.
So important, and we, to this very day, we don't allow these things to enter into the program of recovery. So, Rob?
The highest level that you can achieve in AA is sober. And that's what it all comes down to, people. Okay, this was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on pages 561 of this book. Though none of these principles has the force of rules or laws, they had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has. Well, the internal.
Bob, let's go ahead and go to page 561 real quick. Just read through those so that we have a familiarity with it, please.
So page 561, everybody. Appendices. 1, the AA tradition. 2, spiritual experience. 3, the medical view on AA. 4, the Lasker Award. 5, the religious view on AA. 6, how to get in touch with AA. And 7, the 12 concepts. 1, the AA tradition. To those now in its fold, Alcoholics Anonymous has made the difference between misery and sobriety, and often the difference between life and death. AA can, of course, be just as much to uncounted alcohol not yet reached. Therefore, no society of men and women ever had a more urgent need for continuous effectiveness and permanent unity. We alcoholics see that we must work together and hang together, else most of us will finally die alone. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are, we AA believe, the best answers that our experience has yet given to those ever urgent questions. How can AA best function? And how can AA best stay whole and so survive? On the next page, AA's 12 traditions were seen in their so-called short form, the form in general use today. This is a condensed version of the original long form, AA traditions, as first printed in 1946. Because the long form is more explicit and of possible historic value, it is also reproduced. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for a membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
All right, we're gonna skip the long form. That's something that you guys can go back and read on page 563. We'll go back to where we were. Thank you, Rob, for doing that.
My pleasure.
Just to let you know, everybody in this group, we're doing a line by line. It's important to me to take the time, if it's only an hour a week, to sit down and actually read the book and everything. I think that this is important, and this is why we do the way we do it. Rob and I have been doing this now for almost 8 months, I think. So again, I want to tell everybody I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I just want to throw in that there's no professional class of therapy. AA is not therapy. Okay, it's to help you to quit drinking. Okay, some people that come into the fellowship, they do need help, and they need outside help, and medication, etc. It is not our purpose, and it's not our responsibility to take people off medication. I've heard in the fellowship of people telling others that they don't need this medication or that medication. We're not doctors. We have no business trying to play doctor. Okay, so if you need a doctor, by all means, AA supports those professionals. They give their life to learning about medicine and things that we know nothing about. So I just wanted to throw that in, Leo. Well, the internal difficulties of our adolescence period were being ironed out. public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large number of recovery and reunited homes. These made their impressions everywhere. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement.
Okay, let's stop right there for just a second. One of the things I want to bring up with this acceptance, and I think it's been with even in the last couple of years, maybe the last 2 or 3 years, but I'm watching television programs now where they actually have characters that are specific. One of their traits is that they are recovered alcoholics or they are recovering alcoholics. It's so mainstream now that even TV programs are starting to have characters that are exhibiting that. Now, I'm not a proponent necessarily of sometimes where they've got somebody that's trying to recover and they keep relapsing. But it is something that at least is being recognized. And I think that the general acceptance of people that are non-drinkers, and I will give you this, there is an actual statistic that there are at least 25% of all adults don't drink at all, at period. All right. And the numbers are even bigger when you're talking in terms of people that are just hardly drinkers at all. The next thing is that I wanted to talk about here is that they made their impressions everywhere. Of alcoholics, remember, the definition here is that you are an alcoholic, and we'll talk a whole lot more about this coming up in the not too distant future, who came to AA and really tried. This is where I'm talking about the people that are true alcoholics that have really tried. 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses. You're going to find that Alcoholics Anonymous and the program of recovery is for relapsers, and we'll talk more in detail about that as we go forward. And of the remainder, those who stayed with AA, they did show improvement. So real alcoholics truly committing themselves to the program, 50% got sober at once. So that's not everybody that comes to AA. And in fact, everybody, and we'll find this out, that comes to AA are not real alcoholics, not all of them. And you have to really try. Some people that are alcoholics come and they just don't really they don't commit themselves to the program. So we're not talking about that group. We're talking about a very specific group within AA. And largely today, this statistic holds true. Rob?
Yeah, I just want to mention that when they say really tried, they tried this program. Okay, they didn't try the 12 and 12. They didn't try coming to meetings and meeting makers make it, put the plug in the jug one day at a time, etc. They did the steps. Okay, and it's such a big distinction. As I said earlier, a lot of people come in to the fellowship and they think they're in the program, and that's not true. You know, this is the program, the 12-step, and actually doing them is a totally different thing. You know, heavy drinkers, given sufficient reason, can quit drinking. You know, new girlfriend, new wife, new job, people on their back, getting in trouble with the law. You know, they can quit given sufficient reason. You know, but a real alcoholic, they have no defense against that first drink, which we will be talking about later on. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. I think we can all take a look at when we're in meetings at the fellowship and we see people that come in, they think they can do it on self-will, self-knowledge. They got a little bit of knowledge now that they can now handle it themselves. And then you'll see them come back baffled and bewildered. Another reason for the wide acceptance of AA was the administration of friends in medicine, religion, and the press, together with innumerable others who became our able and persistent advocates. Without such support, AA could have made only the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical and religious friends will be found further on in this book.
We'll keep going, Rob.
Okay, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. Neither does AA take any particular medical point of view, though we cooperate widely with the men of medicine as well as with the men of religion.
Yep, I just want to highlight that those couple of sentences right there. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization, even though we do have some religious tenets. And I'm going to admit that to you right now. I know we talk about this being a spiritual experience for us, but the very fact that we're praying, the very fact that we use the word God, I use higher power for me. It's just that I think it's important to make a distinction here that we're not a religious organization, but we do have religious tenets in there. And it's just by nature of being in one church program, you're still praying to God. It's for a different reason altogether. I get that. I'm not saying that that's what we are. I'm just saying that there are some very similar things between the two that we have. So not a religious organization, but we do have some religious tenets. We're also not, we don't take any particular medical point of view, although I will tell you that we do not subscribe to anybody stopping medications or seeing a doctor as they go through the program of recovery. That is not what we stand for. And this bumper sticker, sobriety is not also, we do not advocate, put the plug in the jug, just don't drink, etc. Because those that are powerless, that doesn't do anybody, that person, it doesn't do any good. Rob?
Okay. Alcohol being no respecter of persons, we are an accurate cross-section of America. And in distant lands, the same democratic evening up process is now going on. By personal religious affiliation, we include Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, and a sprinkling of Muslims and Buddhists. More than 15% of us are women. At present, our membership is pyramiding at the rate of about 20% a year. So far, upon the total problem with several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world, we have only made a scratch. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcohol problem in all its ramifications. Upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. Yet it is our great hope that all those who have as yet found no answer may begin to find one in the pages of this book and will presently join you on the high road to our new freedom.
Okay, Rob, this is the forward to the second edition. A couple of notes there. We are definitely more than 15% women now. I would guess that we're probably in the 40 to 60% as you can just look at this group right here and all of the women that are here as well. Not to mention the different religions that are represented, the different creeds, etc. It's an amazing mix of people. In fact, I think every group that's out there is touched by Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, this is a tradition that we do in this group. We ask that Bill, if he's still with us, if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to give us kind of a synopsis of your thoughts.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey.
Hey,
Thanks a lot, guys. You did a good job today on this. This beginning portion of the book, the title page, the preface, and the forward to the first and second edition, like you said already, it's basically general information and history. And there's really, if you want to go through history, we can sit here for hours and hours talking about each and everything that happened, but basically the point they're trying to get across here, what sticks out to me is on page XVI, where Bill says he suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. Bill got this idea in his head, whether he got it during his spiritual experience or Ebby told him, or Dr. Silkworth told him, or his wife told him. There's all different stories. The one story going around AA that I've heard the most is that Bill was trying to help people, and before he got to Dr. Bob, he was trying to help other people in New York, and he couldn't get anybody sober, and he went home and talked to his wife and said, I'm going to quit trying to help people. Nobody's staying sober. And she told him, what do you mean nobody's staying sober? You are. So maybe Lois pointed it out to him. Maybe Lois and Ebby pointed it out. Maybe the spiritual experience pointed it out to him. Nobody knows exactly where he got that idea. Maybe all of those things he got the idea from. And being a thick-headed alcoholic, it took more than one person telling him it before it could sink in. Who knows? But the point is, by trying to help somebody else, he realized that's what was going to keep him sober. And that's really what this whole book is about. And on the next the next page, right on the top, it says, it also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. In other words, trying to help another alcoholic stay sober is what's going to keep me sober more than anything else. Vital means my life depends on it. That's vital to permanent recovery. If I don't want to drink, if I don't want to relapse, I have to try to do strenuous work with another alcoholic. And strenuous work means take somebody else through this process, walk them through this course of action, take them through the 12 steps. That's what they mean by strenuous work. And you can't do that work if you haven't been through the steps first. So first you have to go through the steps. Then step 12 tells us, try to carry this message to other alcoholics. To continue doing what this program says, you have to keep trying to carry the message to somebody else. And that's what'll keep you sober more than anything else. Thanks a lot. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Perfect.
Leo, I just wanted to read one thing, and we talk about a lot today about recovered. We're not cured of alcoholism. We're recovered but not cured. That presents a conflict to some alcoholics. If we were cured, we would be able to drink responsibly. No, we are not cured. The allergic reaction to alcohol will remain with us for our lifetime, but we have been restored to sanity. That was the problem. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body, page 23. We are now sane where alcohol is concerned. Consequently, we are recovered. So I just wanted to throw that in. If anybody, I'll put my email in the chat. If anybody wants a copy of that, by all means, I will send it to them.
The other thing, Rob, is that Bill has his own class. If you wouldn't mind posting that in the chat as well. We have a request for that also.
Not a problem. Bear with me 1 second while I get that.
Sure. And
here we go.
And thank you, everybody, for being here, including the road trippers, I think is what you guys call yourselves. That's really, really neat to see you guys and the Christmas spirit as well. Everybody
I love the hats
and everything. So thank you. It was worked out great that you guys actually came on the day that we actually are starting the book. There is so much to cover, and we are going to really dig into this. And yes, we do go line by line, but there is a lot to add to that. So hopefully you'll be back. We'd love to see you and love to have you a part of this group and going through this as we go through the rest of the book. So we're going to finish up with the Serenity Prayer. And if you would help us with that.
And then we'll get to Kevin's question.
Yep.
Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you, everybody.
Guys.